Testing. Testing. I ain't really too much expecting nobody to be on here tonight. But so, welcome. Welcome. It's been a while since I've done a live. It's been a while since I've really engaged with this channel with the action that I wanted to. And I just wanted to hop in tonight just to feel it out, make a beginning. Because I'm pretty sure my posting schedule is going to be the late night hour. And I'm just a little curious about who might find me. There's this book that I recently remembered after having not thought about it for many years. It's called The Wall. And it was the first book about healing that I ever encountered. It belonged to my Aunt Bunny. And her room was full of magical things. And this book was one of them. And I was drawn to it. I must have been about 8 or 9 when I first read it. And I read it repeatedly until I could no longer keep up with the book. But I always remembered it. And years later, when I worked as a drug counselor, an addictions counselor, years later when I did that, I made an exercise from that book. It had quite an impact on me. And recently, since I've been doing shadow work with others, having conversations with people about shadow work, people who are interested in it, this book came to my memory again and I wanted to share it. I like the idea of sharing this because if you are someone who is interested in shadow work, usually when I mention shadow work, people either don't know what it is, or if they do have some idea what it is, they tend to be, somewhat fearful of engaging with the work or doing the work. People have a lot of anxiety about the emotions that come up, the discomfort that comes up, all of the range of things, right? And not all of the work in shadow work has to be equally intense. It doesn't always have to be an exercise or a ritual. Sometimes it's listening to a story. Sometimes it's a meditation, a guided meditation. An integrator, a friend of mine parented the term integrator, like a meditation that walks you through the process of reintegrating these parts of your personality that you've pushed away or you've hidden and named negative, So that type of thing. Sometimes it could just be something as simple as listening to a story. So tonight, this'll just be my way of accomplishing a few things, sharing that story, putting some lightweight shadow work out there for people who want it, and seeing who's out here tonight. I don't know when people came in or who's listening, but I'm just saying, like, I'm putting my feelers out there to see who's out there at night, this time of night. Because people who are up, people who are maybe troubled, can't sleep, or looking for ways to relax or heal, and you tend to find peace in doing that at night, I relate. And so I want to find a way to be here for you. All right. This is called The Wall. I'm going to modify it a little bit. Hey, thanks for being here. I hope you can stay for the story. If not, it'll be here for you when you come back. Yeah, so I'm going to modify this a little bit. It takes a bit of a heavily Christian turn. And even though I understand like people that value that, I do want to, I need to make it apply to me right now. I need to make it apply to me, because I'm sharing this as, something very instrumental in my journey. Like I said, this was the first book about healing that I ever read. So some places where it says God, I'll be changing it to ancestor, spirit, universe, diversifying this thing a bit. Here we go. The Wall by Gloria J. Evans, modified on this evening in the Bleaching Hour by Fire Angel. The Wall. I'll show you the pictures too. I don't know when I first began to build the wall. I suppose it was when it occurred to me that I could keep people out of my life by building a simple wall. The wall would be a kind of boundary, a kind of protection. At first, the little wall was only knee-high. It was really quite attractive, made of native stone I had found in my life. I don't know if I'm doing too good at showing the pictures. Oh, I guess it's working. Yes, honor the ancestors. The wall was so small that some people didn't notice and fell flat on their faces. Others saw it, but would step over it and come very close to me. I found this very uncomfortable, so I built the wall higher. This was really much better, but soon I found that people would come and rest their arms on the wall while talking to me. Some stayed too long, and some were not my kind of people. And even when I edged the top of the wall with sharp stones, they didn't seem to notice. One day, one of them vaulted over the wall and stood right inside. This made me angry. I decided to build the wall higher. As I continued to build, I became more and more self-sufficient. I painted designs on the stones. I made the arcs and colored windows that distorted the light so that no one could either see in nor out. The wall pleased me so that I longed to show it to someone or explain how I had achieved each design, but I realized that no one had stopped by to talk for quite some time. Some walked by, not seeming to notice me or my wall. Others stood sadly by and watched me build. I thought they were jealous of my wall, and I resented them, all of them. One day, a man stopped to listen as I explained how I was building the wall. He wanted to come inside to see what I was doing. I explained to him that the whole purpose of the wall was to keep people on the other side. but I could tell he didn't understand or care. As he left, I went back to build the wall higher. I became so absorbed in my wall that I found little time for anything else. I searched my life for new stones, different stones. I found stones that I didn't even know I had. The design was very important to me. I would build and rebuild until it was just the way I wanted it. Some stones were so dear to me that I polished them carefully several times a day. Then one day, I realized the wall was so high that I no longer saw anyone go by. I no longer heard anyone. Everything was quiet. Is anyone there? I yelled. I thought of those who did not like my wall, those who had laughed at it, scorned it, been jealous of it. I sat in the shadows and listened for someone to come and tell me that they really liked it. But it was dark and quiet, very quiet. I don't know how long I sat in the shadow of my memories, but one day I noticed that one of the stones didn't match as well as I thought it had, and the wall was crooked. This was too much. I thought my wall was perfect, but it was not. Frantically, I examined the wall, and sure enough, there were other imperfections. To add to the pain of my discovery, one day, someone yelled from the other side, "Your wall is ugly. It is twisted and gray and misshapen." It was the day that the flower fell at my feet that I ran to the wall and began to cry. I climbed to see who had thrown it over. By the time I reached the top, no one was there. I returned to see the flower and sat for a long time looking at its perfection. I began to see the folly of my wall and its imperfection. Floods of tears brought me to my knees. Oh, I am so alone. My wall is too high. My wall is imperfect and ugly. Everything is in vain. I have nothing left. Won't someone help me, please? Then a strange thing happened. Something inside me stirred as a baby quickens in its mother's womb. And in the stillness of my broken world, I knew in my whole being a blessed presence. I knelt there in wonder that the ancestors would come to me, and I wept with joy that I was not alone and that my darkness had been penetrated by their blessed light. For days I stood in the joy of their presence. My wall shone with the warmth and light of the universe, and I no longer felt cold and alone. I knew that they had watched me build my wall and that they had waited patiently to see me and tell me that it was in vain. Finally, it occurred to me that they would know why my wall was so ugly. When I asked them, they began to teach me. Day by day, Spirit showed me my error, gave the stones names. This stone is jealousy. You must remove it. Sometimes I would be reluctant. For days, I would protest. This was my favorite stone. It was one I had saved and cherished for years. When I was finally ready, they helped me remove the stone. One day, we had removed one of the heavier stones, and a hand came through the opening. Take it, my spirit said. Hesitantly, I took the hand. For a long time, I stood in the warmth of that grasp. Somehow, I knew the hand and the one behind it had been waiting for an opening in my wall. There stirred in me a hunger and a longing for human comfort. At first, I thought their presence within my wall was enough. But with the coming in of the hand and the hand clasp, I knew that they had came to tear this wall down. A part of me wanted to spring forth, but another part of me cried out in fear. Why couldn't I keep a part of the wall? Their presence was enough. I looked at all the stones I had collected throughout my life. Some were still in the wall. The others we had stacked neatly in a corner. If I ever chose to rebuild the wall, I could. I wanted to throw them all away, but he told me that in them I could test my strength. How they tempted me. One day, when no one seemed to be watching, I dashed over and picked up a couple of my cherished stones to rebuild my wall. It was then that I realized that if I were strong enough to live without a wall, I would have to know the stones were there. I would have to know each one of them. And knowing their names, I could not use them again without betraying myself. As we removed more stones, the light came in, and my light would shine out. I began to look through the open places. I could see things that I hadn't noticed for a long time. Dewdrops, ladybugs, sunbeams, and blades of grass. I learned many things, and I remembered many gifts. The more I studied, the more I researched, the more I practiced, the more I wanted to learn. I saw things I had never seen before, and I heard things I had never heard before. One day, I was standing by an open place. A man stopped by to talk. I talked to him about the blessed presence and how it had changed my life. The man said that he understood, but he said, if that's true, why do you still have this block of resentment in your wall? I can't see what you're talking about because this stone blocks the way. I looked, and sure enough, one of my most prized rocks lay directly in front of me, nearly covering one side of the wall. It had been one of the first stones I placed. It was a large conglomerate of disillusionment, childishness, stubbornness, and other petty stones. I asked the man if he would help me remove it. I was so ashamed to show this to anyone else. The man did loosen the rock, and I thanked him for it, and he went on his way. I wonder how I ever could have removed that stone without help. I really tried. I tugged, and struggled, but it only moved slightly. I sat down in despair. I knew the man was right. The stone must be removed. Oh dear, I said. How can I ever remove this one? It's so big and I'm so weak. I went carefully over to the wall and chipped away at each small stone until the large one was diminished. I really wanted it removed, and I did remove it. Even with the stone of resentment gone, people kept stumbling over debris and remnants of the wall as they walked through my life. There was a woman who knew about the wall and the struggle and the ancestors and the spirits, and she had let them help her tear down her wall. She walked in and sat down on one of my stones. I told her what I had done for myself, and she told me what she had done for herself. I told her how I had suffered so, and that I would never forget how forsaken and lonely I felt inside my wall. Yes, she said, self-pity is a terrible thing. When she left, I found the stone of self-pity in my wall. It was wet with tears. I dried it off and laid it with the other stones. The wall was almost demolished. I looked around at all the world I could see. I thought of the great love I had learned and the powers that I was coming to receive, and I breathed a deep sigh of satisfaction and pride that I should come so far. Look at how much I have accomplished, I thought. How much better I know than some of these others out here, these poor, unenlightened ones that do not know spirit as nearly as well as I. It is so easy. Why can't they see? Overwhelmed by all Spirit had done for me and all Spirit had taught me, I stood upon one of the remaining stones and began to tell anyone who had passed what the Blessed Presence had done for me. I was appalled to see that no one seemed to hear or understand what I was saying. I told them how dark and lonely it had been inside the wall, and how the Blessed Presence had come to help me tear down the wall, how vain it was to build walls. I noticed others working on walls and ran over to plead with them to stop, but no one would listen. In my frustration, I cried out, "Why can't they hear? Why can't they understand? Why can't they believe me?" I lay face down on the stone that I had stood upon. It was extremely large, highly polished. It had been my great prize. It was more than life size. "Do you want the answers to your questions?" the universe said. "You know I do." I sighed. "Raise your head and look at the stone you are lying upon." I raised my head and gasped, for I saw my own reflection in the massive stone. There was pride in my look and manner. I knew the stone was pride. Quietly, we removed it. Now, when we could see beyond the meadow and a path led forth from where I stood, then I learned a strange thing, that I had to go, that I had to go forward. I could no longer stand there and be protected. The wall, pieces of it still stood, and there were other stones that still needed to be removed, but it was time for me to go. It was time for me to remember the flower that fell at my feet, the hand that I clasped, the woman who showed me self-pity, the man who showed me resentment. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Then you must go. I must go and do likewise. For whom much is given, much is expected. And it was time for me to go. So I went forth. Soon I saw a wall builder. He had just started to build his wall. I saw pain and hurt in his face and confusion in his frenzy to build. I leaned against the wall, wanting to tell him I understood, but the stones were placed so that the sharp edges cut me, and I retreated in pain. I stood by the wall, nursing my wounds, and in sadness, I watched him build. Soon his wall was so high, I could not see him, and my heart ached because I knew it was dark and lonely inside. I called to him, but he could not hear. The ugliness of the wall was unbelievable. I reached out and touched it and leaned against it. I don't know how long I was there, but one day I heard someone yell, "Your wall is ugly. It is twisted and gray and misshapen." Strangely, though I had never heard a sound from the wall before, great racking sobs exploded from inside. Tears streamed down my face, and I cried out in frustration, "Won't you help him? Please." I thought my heart would break. In desperation, I looked about. If only I could give him a gift to ease his pain. I looked down to find a small flower at my feet. Hastily, I plucked it and threw it over the wall. Then the sobbing stopped, and I knew a great peace. For in some strange way, I knew that the blessed presence had come to him, and that my aching heart and the gift of the flower helped bring it about. I knew that soon there would be an opening in the wall, and I could grasp his hand. I knew that too, he might never know that I was there or who I really was, but that didn't really matter. For in some wonderful way, I had become a part of every person's life through the blessed presence. We would all become one. Somehow, I knew I would never be the same. I returned to my wall and I removed the stones of fear, mistrust, and its indifference. And I began to understand love. Without love, all the things I had learned would be meaningless. I began to live in peace and understanding. I began to learn gentleness and kindness, but it took time. So it was with that I went forth, reaching out. Sometimes just waiting beside a wall, sometimes tossing a flower, sometimes grasping a hand. There are days that I return to my wall. I touch the stacked stones and examine the remnants of my wall. At times, I am filled with the desire to rebuild it, but we talk. The ancestors and I talk, and they help me. And sometimes we remove another stone. It's strange that I begin to recognize others like myself when I see someone with a flower. I know it will be thrown over a wall. Sometimes I see someone standing by a wall sadly, watching a wall builder. I see those things. I see those who are sitting on stones explaining what kind of stones they have used. I know the ancestors are with them too. We pass on the path, and a great love passes between us. I see peace in their eyes and faith in their hearts, and I know that someday the walls will all be down and we will all walk free from place to place. Thank you. There were some parts that I was struggling with changing some of the things, but I hope you got the gist of the story and maybe why it might have such a big impact on me in my journey, especially, to come across this book at 7, 8, 9 years old. It was profound. There are just a few things to think about with the story and just the healing journey that is described here. We never learn exactly what the traumas are that led to the wall building, but we know that there's deep hurt that caused this person to start building the wall. And they name each stone in this wall. So removing these stones, for shadow work, I really prefer the examination of these stones. The information that is contained in these stones is, I guess, this is something good to build upon. When I read it at the time, it was enough for me to say, oh, there's a stone of jealousy. Let's take it out. There's a stone of resentment. Let's take it out. But I mean, today, let's look at that differently when we're doing shadow work. These things they don't have to be pushed away or eliminated. We have to find ways to integrate them into ourselves, because a lot of them, even the ones that we think are unfavorable, they do have a place. They do have a place. Our shadow is just not simply formed by our traumas, but also by the daily oppressions we experience. And yeah, sometimes there's some good tools and good information inside of our shadow. So do not be afraid to go there. I'm not going to stick around too long. I'm going to be popping in and out over the next couple of nights after dark during the late night, just trying to get a feel for who's out here and sharing the information that I feel called to share, or that I'm called to share. So thank you for being here, and I will see you the next time.